Welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones. I am a certified personal trainer, and I'm here to help you achieve your fitness goals without pain. In each episode, I'll share tips and strategies that will help you stay safe and pain-free while you're working out. I'll also interview experts in the field of fitness and pain management. So if you're ready to learn how to stay active and pain-free, then subscribe to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones, and today I am joined by Dr. Saara Haapenen. She is a sport and exercise psychologist, former elite diver, Olympic-level athlete, and now someone who is helping people perform better, not just in sport, but in life and the workplace. She blends a science-backed performance strategies with real-world coaching experience to help individuals create sustainable long-term change without relying on fitness fads or restrictive diets. She has coached athletes from beginner to Olympic level across multiple countries and is the creator of the Move at Work Challenge, a program that has helped hundreds of professionals build healthier, happier work lives. And she has served on the Colorado Governor's Council for Active and Healthy Lifestyles. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm super excited. You've done a lot of things. It's awesome. So you've gone from, because you were a diver, right? So, which is insane, and the amount of concentration and athletic ability you have to have. You're almost in the Olympics. You got your PhD. Now you're working on performance and corporate wellness. How does all that connect for you?
That's an interesting question. So I've never really had a plan besides going to the Olympics. So my life goal up until 2008 is when I found out 12 days before the opening ceremonies. So they were supposed to take 34 women and I was ranked 30th, and then they ended up taking 29. So I was the very first person not to go. But after that, I just it all kind of worked out. Now I'm more aware that I have ADHD. And I've always been chasing the dopamine and really I enjoy helping people, and I enjoy helping people find a sustainable individual path to success, what that looks like for those people or those organizations. And I think that's been, regardless of all the rabbit holes I've gone down and the other businesses, like at one point I had a sunglass company and a digital media agency. And now looking back, knowing that's probably the ADHD, but I've never really had a plan except knowing that I want to help people, and health and fitness have been one of my passions. And then now and performance and kind of psychology and how to perform at your best, and motivation was a huge part. That was what I did my research expertise is in motivation. And now looking back, I know that that's because I was just trying to understand motivation, because then I thought, well, if I know all about motivation, then I could do the hard things like history. I'm not a fan of history. Like, you start talking any historical events to me and I'll pretend to be there, but there's something in my brain that just shuts off, and I'll pretend to be polite and nod, but I'm not interested in what I'm not interested in. And now I know that's the way that my brain works and neurotype, but I really dug into this whole motivation piece and self-determination theory and achievement goal theories and all these things, because I was just trying to figure out if I just understood enough about motivation, then maybe I could, in my mind, apply myself better to the things that I really didn't enjoy. But now that I know more about it, it just makes total sense. And that's not really how our brains work. And we're not meant as humans to do what we don't. Of course, sometimes you have to do what you don't like, but to force yourself to do something that's miserable just because you feel like you should be doing it is not necessarily the way that I approach life or work with clients. So yeah, that's kind of all how it comes together.
So what was, in your study of motivation, what was the most interesting thing that you realized, aside from the fact that it doesn't apply the way the random human thinks that either you're motivated or you're not, or that you can create motivation out of nothing? What was the most unique thing that you found that you're like, oh, that was a serious aha moment?
It is very individual. And my research that I did, so we looked at high-level athletes, and the definition of high level was you had to compete at nationals or above in your country. So we looked at athletes in Finland, in Canada, and in the United States. And along with motivation, we looked at a lot of other things like perceived competence and autonomy support and creating coaching climates of success. But what really showed up and what is very interesting, and I still have always advocated for, is like every human being is an individual, but also there's cultural effects. So for instance, in Finland, we are asking NHL players who play in the National Hockey League in the United States, who are getting paid a lot of money, who are obviously very good. It's a cultural thing there to say, like, I'm not so good. Even if you are good, even if you're in the NHL. And then you think about North American athletes, like a high schooler or
And we over-exaggerate.
Anybody, and we're like, we're amazing. Like, whether you're good or not, you're like, yeah, you're so good. So, and then comparing these cultures, and the studies that we did have never been done before, but just looking at the difference and knowing that there are cultural differences. And even within cultures, like sport teams have different cultures, the coach creates a culture, but it is influenced more by you're not just you in a little box, and it works exactly the same for everybody. And so that would be number one, is there are these big cultural differences. And when you're presenting research in academia, sometimes it's challenging because it's hard to present new research because you always have to refer to previous research. So along my journey, there was a lot of frustration with that because we were discovering all these new amazing things, but we couldn't report them that way because of the way research works and how you get funding. And I don't want to go there, but the other thing that's great about motivation is you can move yourself closer. So it's basically a continuum from intrinsic motivation to amotivation. So no motivation at all. And if there's something that you really want to do, regardless of what it is in sport, life, relationship, career, anything, because your human brain is the same regardless of if I can take the athlete away and put them somewhere else, they're still going to have the same brain. That you can move with competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So those are the three basic psychological needs for optimal well-being. You can move yourself to become more intrinsically motivated, which is going to be the motivation that keeps you sustained with motivation the longest. So even if you think that you're not motivated to do something, there are things that you can do to move yourself a little bit closer to the intrinsic motivation. But of course, whatever you think, you're going to drive your beliefs and your actions. So first, it's like believing that you can change. But yeah, knowing that motivation is kind of a continuum and you have control over it. And I always like to say, whatever you decide is true. So if you decide it's going to be hard, it's going to be hard. If you decide you can do it and it can be easy, or you decide it's going to be fun, like your brain's going to look for evidence for that. So it is really a huge part of what I talk about and what I do is mindset and setting yourself up for success by controlling the controllables.
So when you're dealing with somebody who has a high level of expertise, whatever it may be, whether it's athletics or business, when we're talking about motivation, or even just how somebody perceives something, how do you avoid burnout or getting stuck? Like, what adjustments do you have to make that motivation, I want to say, sustainable? Because sometimes people overshoot or they overcommit, and then, it becomes an obligation instead of a motivation.
Yeah. So there's a few things. A lot of people, motivation only starts behavior January 1st, and that lasts 9 days. So they say by the second Friday of January, over 90%, it changes every year, but over 90% of people have given up on their goal. Their New Year's resolution. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to eat healthy. Like, what happens is life gets hard and your brain doesn't want to be challenged, and our brains do not want success for us. So our brains want to keep us safe and not dying. That's literally their only job. And the more you repeat a behavior, like let's say giving up on a New Year's goal or saying you're going to do something and then not following through, that becomes basically like an automatic thought process for your brain. And your brain always craves comfort because it doesn't want success for you. We want success for ourselves. It wants to keep you alive and safe and not dying. And so what it's going to do is repeat behaviors that you've done before. So what I like to say with humans is know that ahead of time. Give yourself strategies, guidelines. Like realistically, let's just use January 1st as an example. Someone hires a personal trainer like myself and says, I want to work out 5 days a week. how many days are you working out now? 0. I'm like, well, that's like a really good way to set yourself up for failure, because going every day to the gym or 5 days, like that's way too much. So starting small and starting by taking action, because once you take action, you're going to get a little bit of dopamine, and then you're going to get a tiny little bit of result, and then you're going to get motivation, and then it's going to be easier to take more action. So a lot of people are like, I'm waiting to get motivated. I'm going to start on Monday. It's often starting the behavior by doing the thing you don't want to do. And also, there's a part of your brain called the ACC. So anterior cingulate cortex, which is like a muscle, right? Like I didn't get ripped doing one bicep curl. Like you can't just do it once. You got to do it over and over again. But this part of your brain grows a little bit every time you do a hard thing. Every time you say you're going to do something hard and you follow through on it. This part of your brain is bigger in athletes. It's smaller in obese people, right? Because athletes are consistently pushing themselves a little bit harder. To get better, you have to, like, to get stronger. I like to think of it like you break down muscle tissue and then it grows and you get bigger and stronger. And it's kind of the same way with training your brain, like pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone when you know you want to do something that's going to get you to your future self. So I always also like to say, like, let's make decisions for future Saara or for future Dana versus not the person that we are today, because the person we are today are going to make the same decisions to keep us here comfy. And a year from now, we want to be a different person than we are today. If you're growth minded and if this is your goal, right? Some people are very comfortable being where they're at. And if they were exactly the same space next year at this time, great. Those aren't the people that I usually work with. Usually people I work with want to be better, want to be awesome, want to perform at their best. But it is giving yourself tools, strategies, techniques that when it gets hard, what are you going to do? And I call it DIA. I'm in Denver, not Denver International Airport, but deciding in advance. What are you going to do when someone brings cookies into work and they're in the workroom and you're deciding in advance that, like, if cookies are there, I'm only going to have one. Or I'm going to have a meat stick in my office desk that I will pair when I have that cookie so that my insulin doesn't spike and I can have protein. Like knowing what you're going to do. So in that moment, when you want dopamine and your monkey brain is like, let's do this, it's fun. That you can say, yes, I acknowledge that part of my brain, but we're deciding in advance for our future self of like, here's what we're going to do. And this is the hard part now. But often when we think things are hard, it's a few moments after that you're like, that wasn't so hard. Like I survived. And then you're teaching your brain. So next time it's a little bit easier. And I'm not promising that it's ever, if you don't like working out, first I'd like check that language because maybe you just haven't found the movement that you love yet.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you still your whole life, you just don't like it, but you like the effects of it. You like how your brain feels afterwards. You like the energy that you get. You like how your mood is more manageable. You like how you're not screaming at your significant other and your children. You like a lot of the outcomes of working out, even though maybe you don't like the action. And the things about our brain that are awesome, it's like wherever our thoughts go, our energy flows. Like if you've ever seen, for me, a red Tesla to me resembles in my brain, I want to have a wellness center one day in the mountains, like a retreat center. So every time I see a red Tesla that's linked to my brain, then I'm like, oh, my wellness center. And before I linked that, I never saw red Teslas. And even yesterday I was driving around for less than 5 minutes, like right to like 3 miles away. I saw 4 and I'm like, woo, my wellness center's all over the place. Whatever you pay attention to, you're going to see more of it. And your brain's, that's exactly how your brain works. So like maybe you don't like working out, but what are the things that you do like doing? Decide in advance what you're going to do. And we got to start making decisions for our future self.
I love that. Speaking of brains, you do a significant amount of work around ADHD and focus. How do we unlock? Because I see it as a superpower. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily see it. They see, crazy squirrels running around and not staying focused or whatever. There are skills that ADHD just lines into. Like, I don't know too many drummers that would be, right? Because you're doing multiple things at the same time and you have to have like that big old brain to be able to do the movements. So how have you noticed that it's shown up in people's performances where they're able to kind of reach a higher level?
I love ADHDers. So all my I mainly just work with ADHD humans. I have a blanket on me because the AC was blaring and now I'm sweating again. So I'm just going to get comfortable. Since my own diagnosis, I thought everyone had the same type of brain I did. So I thought I could sit here, look outside, hear the electricity, like be doing a whole bunch of things. Like I did not realize that people have one thought at a time. And for ADHDers, especially because of my training my brain in specifically my sport, which was diving. Not only was that adrenaline seeking, not only was that like you have to turn the part of your brain off that says, this is dangerous because we're jumping backwards, flipping towards the board. Like you could really get hurt depending how high.
100%.
So I've been training my brain since I was 10 when I started diving, but not realizing. And I would say probably 99% of my athletes who dive also have ADHD. So I've been surrounded by it before I even knew it was a thing. But I would say the superpowers include things like out of the box thinking, brainstorming, this ability to kind of have this special intuition of reading a room or feeling people's energy. And part of it is because we see so much and can take in so much information at once. And often with females, they tend to have inattentive, where when you think about the typical ADHD, you think about a hyperactive 6-year-old boy who can't sit still in a chair in class. I'm lucky that I have combined, so I have both. But basically, the internalized chaos for females, which is why they don't get diagnosed until later, is all in their head. So it might show up like daydreaming. And because of our ADHD brains, I think it's by the age of 12, an ADHDer has had 20,000 more negative instances, especially from people of power, like teachers, parents, being like, sit down. Why aren't you paying attention? All these things. Especially females, we tend to develop people-pleasing tendencies. And being able to do this thing called masking. Like for me, I do not like being yelled at. I really shut down. So I really early learned how to anticipate people's emotions, kind of be able to control that, kind of trying to do what I can so I would not get yelled at because I really didn't like to be yelled at, and then developed masking and then studied performance and realized that it's just so interesting now, like looking back on all the things that make so much sense in my head. But the question that you asked is, how do you motivate? What are the special skills basically for ADHDers? You're 4 times more likely if you're an entrepreneur to have ADHD, just because we don't necessarily like taking direction from others. There's a thing called rejection sensitivity, dysphoria, and like demand avoidance, all these things. But we tend to also like kind of get bored with the typical boring jobs. So ADHDers, you'll find a lot of my doctors. I have a lot of doctors who are ADHDers, paramedics, teachers. There's a whole bunch of teachers, project managers, any sort of thing where you have to juggle a lot of things at the same time because our brains are like light switches. So they're on or they're off. So that's a good insight into this model I created that helps with motivation for ADHDers. So it's called fun.com. I changed it and I really tried to get that domain, but it was over $3,000. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. Okay. So the F, if you have something you need to do that's a little bit challenging and you have an ADHD brain, and if you have there's no such thing as normal, but if you have a neurotypical brain, all this will work for you too. It will just be funner and more entertaining and you'll maybe like your life a little bit more. But the first one stands for F. So fun, interest, enjoyment. What is a boring task? How can you bring in a little oomph? For me, another person there really helps. Like I'm a social being. I like other things. I also really like to make things fun. I find with females, I work with a lot of females. I always want them to play. And they're like, especially for my 19, 20-year-olds, they're like, no, but I'm an adult now. I was like, I always want you to play. I want you to be playful your whole life. I was recently at the Art and Science of Health Promotion conference, and there was a whole session on playfulness, and I think that's really important. So whenever you can bring play into anything or make it fun or enjoyable or have more interest in it, that's going to be the F. U stands for urgency. So if you have a brain like mine, you might find that you procrastinate and you wait until the very last minute. And even though you know you have a lot of time to do something, you don't do it until the last minute. And this is because we're waiting. We kind of have anxiety as that urgent deadline. And then the urgency and the anxiety gives you a little shot of dopamine so that finally you have like this pressure that you can start doing the thing. So my advice always is to know that that's a thing and give yourself just enough time with maybe a little bit of few extra hours, but try, and this is easier to say, harder to do, try and let go of that guilt, shame that you're feeling about not doing the thing that you know that you should be doing. So I call it shooting all over yourself. But if you know that you're going to wait until the last minute, give yourself permission and just give yourself a little bit of extra time. But once that kind of anxiety is high enough, then we're going to get that hyper focus. And then you're like a freight train, if you know what I'm talking about. Once you get it, you're like, I'm just bringing this up. Watch me write a website. Okay, F, fun. U, urgency. N, novelty or newness. This is especially important if you have one of those tasks that's boring or repetitive. How can you make it new? How can you make it novel? Sometimes that might just be doing the same task in a different room, in a different environment, at a coffee shop, in a different way, maybe trying a new application or AI, but making a way to find a new way to do the same thing. C is challenge or competition. So it doesn't necessarily need to be with someone else. It can be you versus you. Can you do the same task faster than you did it yesterday? Can you do the same task that you did? Like, it depends what the task is. So you can compete against yourself. Can you do it better than you did it last time? Like my husband says, you have to turn everything into a competition. I was like, yes, 100% of the time I have to win. And it's way funner for me if I do that. O stands for others. So I mentioned that a little bit, but having other people around you, body doubling is huge for starting a task. Task transitioning is usually one of the hardest things, especially from a low dopamine task to a high dopamine. From a high dopamine task to a low dopamine task, that can be a real challenge. So having other people around, I'll go to a coffee shop and then I pretend everyone is looking at my computer, making sure that I'm like writing my newsletters. And of course no one is, but I need that external pressure. And also you might notice like maybe when someone comes over to your house, all of a sudden you start like cleaning your counters.
100%.
Just doing stuff just because there's another body around. Like we are, and others is also one of 3 basic psychological needs from the self-determination theory, but they use relatedness. So being around or belongingness, depending on who's reporting on the study, but being around other people who are thinking the same as you, doing the same things as you, because the 5 people you're around the most are going to influence how you think, how you act, how you take action. So just be careful of that. And then the last one is movement. And of course, I'm an advocate for movement, but that's not necessarily what I mean. If you can see on my thumb, I have a little like fidget thing. I got my PhD written with a vibration platform under my desk. On my back patio, I have a bunch of rocking chairs, a hammock. So often for our brain, if we can be in movement, it's enough stimulation that we can focus on the hard task. So F is for fun, U is for urgency, N is for newness or novelty, C is for challenge or competition, O is for others, and M is for movement. So that is the fun.com model to help yourself be motivated or others.
I love it. So this has been a very interesting conversation. Where can people find you and learn more about your work? Because it sounds like it can be applied to anything and everything. So they should all get some information.
Yes, for sure. So I'm only Dr. Saara on the internet. You can find me at drsaara.com, which is kind of the brain and performance side of my business. And then Performance is Haapenen is more of the wellness side of my business. But I'm the only human on the internet with my name with a doctor in front of it. There's 5 other people and most of them are in Finland. But I'm really easy to find if you just search me on the interwebs.
Dr. Saara, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. That was so fun.